back. You're watching South Africa Open for Business, a special broadcast from Meetings Africa 2013. Still with me, my panel is Amanda Kotsenhlapo, Executive Manager for South African National Conventions Bureau. Next to her, we have Daniel Kinnear of Africa Strategy Group, as well as with us is Gary Grimmer of Gaining Edge, and of course, Manaj Papa from our national carrier. Before the break, we were talking about intra-African issues. We would now want to look outside Africa and talk about how other people view South Africa, or the continent for that matter, as a business tourism destination. One of our producers went around and spoke to some of the hosted buyers at Meetings Africa 2013. Let's take a look.
Africa's biggest business expo, Meetings Africa, is all about buyers of conferences and meetings events. We had a word with a few of the buyers who were in attendance during the 2013 edition of Meetings Africa about the opportunities and challenges that Africa and South Africa faces in wooing business tourism to the African shores.
We actually just sold a program coming over here, and I hadn't been here for 10 years. So it was time to come back and do almost a site inspection and attend the meeting. Perfect timing. So we've got about 150 people that are going to come to Cape Town and then do Kruger and some of the game reserves.
As this is my first time in South Africa, I'm looking for various venues which will fit our group's expectations. Also, which is very important, is the atmosphere. Also the landscape, what we can expect, because after a 3 days conference in Johannesburg, we will go for another part of the country, and I think we'll find a lot of interesting factors here which will attract people coming to South Africa.
Currently in South Africa, service is vital. With the tight economy we're having, our service levels have got to up.
I was kind of surprised because I wasn't really aware of the exchange rate. It's a good value. South Africa is right now the rand and the exchange rate with the US dollar. And you don't see that in Europe. The other thing about South Africa is the airfare is actually cheaper to come here than to fly to Europe right now. But the experiences you get here, you can't get anywhere else.
They have the impression about very interesting cities like Johannesburg, Cape Town, but they think about the wildlife, to be honest. It's simple as that. And I think we can meet these expectations here and create a wonderful program for them.
The feedback you're going to get from a potential customer is, it's so far, you know. And we get the same thing with when we present Hong Kong or China or Australia or New Zealand. Yeah, it is far, but that's why you want to go. This came direct from JFK or from Washington. So it was a 14-hour flight, but to me that's a good nap.
Many thanks to producer Karabule Tlasa for getting some of those animated views. And back with my panel, Amanda, it seems that, it's about business tourism, but people also want to have a bit of fun when they come here. And our leisure tourism sort of infrastructure and attractions also help to push your business, doesn't it?
We always say this, that a country without a strong leisure brand will be very difficult for them to do business. Gary will tell you a lot about that. So for us, we really can, we feed off that strong brand. But what is important is that these meetings, we did a study, and 40% of all delegates are bringing a company person. And they also spend then 1,000 rand a day, whilst the partner is in the business meeting. And I think that is important. So for us, it is the diversity that we can offer. It is that once-in-a-lifetime destination. And when people then have to make a decision on where do they go this year to a conference, the choice can be then easily ours, because it is that diversity that we offer, from a business meeting into amongst the lions and have another kind of meeting.
Okay. Manaj, I noticed that you were nodding your head quite vigorously during that insert. and it's almost you were taking all the credit for everything that he had to say aviation-wise. Like he talked about flying directly. A little known fact, people can fly directly from China to Johannesburg or to South Africa for that matter. Tell us
That's
about
correct,
that.
yeah. And I guess because I'm representing the airline, all my airline colleagues, I take all the credit on that. Couple of things the gentleman had mentioned, which stands out for me. The one is South Africa's value proposition, the currency exchange. The currency works in the favor, and yes, it's perceived and it's seen as flying into South Africa from abroad is a cheaper option. It's definitely a cheaper option. It's not a cheaper option for South Africans, but from the guys coming in. From an airline point of view, things we look at, especially for the target market that we're talking about, direct flights. You know, the guy wants to get there. He doesn't want to have many stops. And I think South African Airways boasts of being the airline out of South Africa that has more direct flights than anyone else. Even if it is a 14 or 16-hour flight, as we just started commence our flights to Beijing, you know, you have a great meal on board, you can have great 8-hour sleep, in time for breakfast, and then you're at your destination. So yeah, it's all those factors are taken into account when we design where we want to be and how we want to participate globally.
You know, in my research, Gary, I want to bring you in as well as Daniel. We want to talk about BRICS in particular. In my research, what came about is the fact that the local industry, business tourism industry, need to take out some time to understand the market. We're hearing from the people in the inset that have these needs and wants that are just ordinary needs and wants of ordinary tourists. They want good flights, good accommodation, and infrastructure. But getting to understand the BRICS customer, let's call him the customer, is there, do you see, Gary, a move in that direction from the African business tourism market?
I think so, and again, it depends on if you're talking about South Africa or Africa. I do think South Africa is further down the road. I think they understand this market better maybe than some of our neighbors, but I think the rest of Africa will come along pretty quickly. I think the part about understanding BRICS customers or just business events customers, I think one of the things is a lot of those interviews were with incentive planners, and that's part of the business events market. But if you were to talk to convention planners, what you'd find is, like Amanda says, that the leisure opportunities and attractions are part of the appeal, but they're much more focused on business issues. In a way, the way to think about it is when a delegate decides whether to come or not, they're going to look at, is it a good place to visit, as well as can I conduct business while I'm there? But the delegate's never going to come if the person planning the meeting doesn't choose us as the place to have the meeting. So they're much more focused on making connections with us in terms of economics and trade and business engagement. And they're going to pick a place that has a good market, that has leading innovation, as well as good facilities and things. And in a way, the leisure part comes in as a differentiator later on down the line.
Later on down the line. Daniel, do you agree?
Yeah, I think there's been a not seismic shift, but there's been a shift to South-South collaboration within the BRICS complex. There's been this intra-Africa drive, both at this meeting and across different fora. And I think although the traditional partners are still the industrialized nations of Europe and the United States, there has been a mega change. And I think as South Africa markets itself, as Africa markets itself, it has to be cognizant of that change. And that change is moving to the BRICS space in a broader, but also to the large Asian economies of Indonesia and Malaysia, but also in South America to Argentina and Venezuela and so on. So I think we've got I think it's to be tactical engagements on how we position South Africa and Africa, but also strategic, which is more longer term and builds one's own resource within Africa. But
you say it's not a seismic shift, so it's not exactly something that people are writing headlines about today. But it is a shift in any case.
Absolutely.
South to south. Are we able to quantify intra-BRICS kind of trade, or is it still very? Well, because there's people wanting to know. Okay, fine, we're part of BRICS, but what does this mean for us?
Yeah, I think the BRICS. South Africa has only been a member of BRICS for the last 2 years. Has been attended the last 3 years ago, and will host in exactly a month from now the BRICS summit in Durban. I think South Africa has taken it very seriously. I think South Africa has also insisted at this BRICS summit, that it's about partnership of development, integration, and industrialization. So that's the theme of BRICS in Africa. So South Africa has taken the initiative. As far as the impact of this these relationships, they have been resource-driven. They have been as far as a number of the partners that South Africa has. But I think there's a maturity. A year ago, South Africa signed some sort of protocol with China, with the opening, I think, January last year of direct flights to Beijing. South Africa's airport management company, AXA, manages Mumbai and Sao Paulo. And the carrier flies directly. So I think there is a consolidation of certainly the backbone.
Let's ask Amanda. Amanda, just how close are we as far as business tourism with our BRICS partners, with our other BRICS partners?
You know, I think what is so important, and that is really that we saw this year at Meetings Africa, if you look at the BRICS partners, I look at the hosted buyers. There's 175, hosted buyers that were qualified, and 78% of them never been to South Africa. And the one thing about it is that if you look at the BRICS countries, they are actually the ones that the number of delegates that came is India, 36.
Okay.
Number 3 is China, 13. Then you go down to number 4, it's Brazil, with 9. And then just close after that was Russia, 8. Did we plan it like that? I think that is where we're moving. I think we are doing a trade show in China, in Beijing, CIBTM, where we really establish good relationships. We also do, AIM, that is the Asia Pacific one, where we also meet. And this business that we are in is a long-term building of relationships. And I think that is the important thing. If you then look at normal figures for tourists coming to South Africa, we have a growth in Brazil of 51%. In India, you have 16% growth. You have a 34% in Russia, and you have a 54% in China. And we did a study with the Chinese visitors specifically. 45% of those are actually, in the business zone. So for us, I think it's definitely, it definitely helps. It brings the discussion, point to discuss about how can we help each other. The one thing that I just want to say specifically about Commonwealth, it actually opened a lot for us, to be part of and have some, because the Commonwealth, specifically Commonwealth associations, and it brings the India closer, much closer to us to actually rotate some of those meetings.
I want to bring Gary and Manoj in. I want you both to answer, how serious do you think we are as a region with our other BRIC partners?
Okay. I think we're serious. I guess what I would say is that when it comes to our BRIC partners, we're like almost any other country on earth. We're interested in them in a commercial or a business way because they are the big emerging economies. So part of why we're getting those delegates from those countries is because they're burgeoning economies. And we have to compete with countries all over the world to get their attention of those economies. In a way, I want to turn it around and say what I think is really important about South Africa being in BRICS is the worldwide recognition that South Africa is one of those major emerging economies. And what that means is that people all over the world are looking at those economies, wanting to engage, wanting to get involved, and it's going to be a huge boost in terms of South Africa and actually all of sub-Saharan Africa in terms of promoting this part of the world as a place you need to come because we're a big emerging economy.
Manoj?
And I think just to add on that, I mean, how serious is South Africa? I think from an airline point of view, most definitely we see the value, and we've aligned our business accordingly. We've increased frequencies into Sao Paulo. We now fly daily into Mumbai. We were only flying 4 flights into India. We now have gone daily into Mumbai. Of recent, we've just started flying 3 times into Beijing. We're currently chatting to the government officials to give us access to more entry points into Beijing. So yes, very serious. And the other thing about it is, when an airline flies into those destinations, there's a whole lot of infrastructure that gets set up. We set up offices. We work very closely with the tourism organizations. We work very closely with the business councils, because at the end of the day, it comes to sustainability for us. Else we're not going to feature the route. So yes, from a South African Airways point of view, very serious on
I don't know if the airline has a method in which, I don't know if this is even a very good question, a method in which you can sort of collate who is coming to South Africa and for what purposes. I mean, are you able to do that? Is that even allowed?
Yeah, well, basically what I do is, and the way in which we, from an airline economics point of view mainly, I get to understand very carefully what segments I'm playing in. So what part of my business is corporate, what part of my business is leisure, what part is visiting friends and relatives, and now there's a new segment coming. Well, what part of my business is MICE, So yes, we're able to see it. But what we notice as well is with regards to any developing routes, any developing destination, it usually starts off with leisure. It usually starts with leisure. With Beijing at the moment, there's almost a 60% leisure for now, where people are starting to get a feel of this country, and we're progressing towards moving that into a stronger corporate channel.
Daniel, you spoke about the trade between Africa and some of the BRIC partners, China, and you mentioned the fact that a lot of it is resource driven. I don't know if this is the platform even, but what role can business tourism play in ensuring that it's a more balanced type of trade? In the first half, we were talking about intellectual and the knowledge economy and intellectual kind of exchange. What role do you think business tourism can play to say, wait a minute, you can't just keep coming here to take our raw material and go and selling it back to us beneficiated and so on?
Yeah, I think there's a certain pragmatism that is setting in within the BRICS member states and their relationship with South Africa or Africa. I think there's a realization you can not only extract, you've got to add value. Secondly, the infrastructure that is there, that has been put in place to move resources to ports has had a positive impact. But I think also that in itself has increased the discovery of Africa beyond the resource space. And therefore, I think with the work that Amanda and her bureau is doing, is that it will eventually feed into that. And if we consider at the moment that notwithstanding that the BRICS member states are the major investors in Africa and in South Africa, FDI is smaller than what African governments are investing in their own economies, in their own infrastructure. We emphasize too much the FDI impact from the outside, but African governments are doing a tremendous amount. And I think if African events and meetings promoters get together, they can have that same impact within the Africa space and looking at the outside as cherry on the cake over time. But it's a journey.
Right. So there's a lot of pressure on you, Amanda, not just to bring people here, but to change the world as well, hey? Okay, we're gonna go to the audience, and I know that we have some questions for some of my panel. I know there's a question for Amanda from somebody out here. Can we have a microphone to? Yes, thank you.
Good morning. Good morning to the panel. I'm Julie May Ellingston from the Durban International Convention Centre. A lot has been spoken this morning about the knowledge economy, and I think that we're all in absolute agreement that that is the way to build our country and certainly to build Africa. We also heard over the last few days about the challenges that these associations face in actually trying to organise events, get basically a more professional attitude towards the associations. So I'm interested to know, basically from Amanda and from Gary as well, as to what can, is there a clear strategy in terms of how we can help these associations to become more professionals, to actually be able to host meetings, and then what can we as service providers do to help in terms of that strategy?
Okay, I think let's take another question so we can have both those answers. The lady in front with the orange jacket, thank you.
Hello, my name is Linda Pereira. I'm from Lisbon, Portugal, so I'm one of those infamous hosted buyers and working with meetings, not incentives. I think sometimes the South Africans are their own worst enemies, and when we approach professors and scientists, etc., for meetings, very often they're the first ones to say, "Oh, no." We almost actually have to beg them. So what I was wondering, what is being done to change this attitude and to kind of educate them into being more proactive in helping us to bring meetings, because they actually become opponents to us bringing meetings rather than our support. So what
Are you
is
talking
actually
about the South African professionals themselves?
Professors, engineers, doctors, those people that we need on our side when we want to bring the meeting locally.
Okay, I think those two questions, Amanda and Gary, please.
Do you want to go first?
You go first.
Okay. I think one of the important things, and thank you for those questions, and you know, as industry players, Durban ICC, you know, we, like I said before, we cannot actually without our industry. That is an effort that we need to do together. We did, you know, all sign a Winners One pledge to say that it's not our strategy, it's not our targets, but it is the industry target. One of the things that we did was to identify certain sectors, you know, that we need to align with our economy. Mining, you know, IT, all the strong sectors that we want to build out, because that is where how you do that knowledge economy. And go after those, you know, together. I think the thing that I want to say is to give them, Gary has a thing that he say, you know, it's very difficult to get the local to say yes. And all that it is to tell them that there's an infrastructure. I met one of the associations yesterday, and they said, the old a professor is actually retired already, you know, and he said he doesn't want to lose his house. Now, we hear that all the time, you know, when they have to do meetings. And he said, why didn't I know about you long time ago to know that there's an infrastructure, not just convention bureau, because that is an entry point, you know, for these international associations. And we cannot go out and bid for meetings. We need our local to say and put up their hand at the meeting and say, you know what, I think I want to bring this meeting to South Africa, but they are scared. And so for us, it's an education process. And we do what we did this year, that we want to build out next year is Bond Day, Business Opportunity Networking Day, where we have an association day, where people came together and they had those issues and they talked about this. And it's really for us to have that meetings infrastructure. And meetings infrastructure is way beyond just our buildings. It's really the services that we can render. So that is, you know, that is really our strategy. Focused. Where do we go? So that we're not like it's a blanket, you know, just like anyone hit anyone. Of course, we're not going to say to any other industry that want to bring a meeting, but I think it is also, the strategy is to really be focused, yeah.
Okay, Gary?
Yeah, I guess what I would add is that those two questions actually relate to each other, because we have to mobilize the thought leadership in South Africa and other parts of Africa if we want to bring these meetings in. If you want the meetings, you have to invite them. If they come, you have to host them, and that means that you need the local thought leaders and political or engineering or medical or scientific leaders to actually step up and help do that. Like Amanda says, and like the question said, it's not just in South Africa, it's all over the world. They're a bit hesitant sometimes. They're busy. They're afraid that it'll take all their time. They don't have the time to do it. But I think South Africa's pretty lucky, because we had a meeting the other day and we talked about that bringing these meetings in is actually culturally and economically transformative. It's important for this nation. And when we talk to these leaders, these thought leaders, and people who are running associations, they all seem pretty eager. And I think there's this sense of, look, for the love of the country and for the sake of patriotism and making a contribution to our continued transformation, I got a sense in that room that there's a lot of South Africans ready to step up to the plate.
And it is big business at the end of the day. It's not a matter of just getting people here to come and have their own talk shops. It makes a proper contribution to the economy. And I know there isn't any research as such, but we looked at pretty big figures, like 5 billion rand a year. I mean, that is a lot of money in anybody's language. All right, so we've come to the end of the discussion, and we've just got time for closing remarks. I'm going to go from Manaj all this way. What is your last remark that you'd like to leave Africa with?
I think definitely that South Africa and Africa is a place where it's going to be happening from now. And from an airline point of view, we're well geared to support all initiatives with regards to this. And if we can't get you there on our scheduled flight, we even have charter operations that works really well for large groups and events of this nature. But be assured of our commitment. I mean, as our tagline says, we take Africa to the world and we bring the world to Africa.
I like that. Africa it really is the African century.
It is.
Great stuff. Gary, do you think it's the African century, or do you want to
No, I
come
do.
in on something else?
I do think it's the African century, and it's going to benefit those African nations that get more proactive in terms of gleaning their benefit from it. I guess my last thought is this. If you talk about every nation in Africa, they aspire to be a well-developed economy. When you look at the kind of evolution of economies, it starts agriculture, then it goes manufacturing, then it goes knowledge, and then it goes creative. And when you take those last two, where we're really trying to get as a continent and as a country here, this is a really important industry because, again, like I said before, this is trade and intellectual engagement. And if you want to get up there into the knowledge and creative economies, you have to engage with the rest of the world.
Great. Daniel, closing remarks?
I think Gary made a very good point. I think that as Africa begins to organize itself, as the Conventions Bureau is doing, I think it can take advantage of the opportunities of this African century. It'll be an indictment if we miss the boat again.
And Africa is taking note. I mean, in my travels, I've seen convention bureaus. First time in Africa, this building coming up is called a convention building happening on the continent. Africa is taking note of this industry and building those infrastructures that are needed to actually support it. Hey.
Absolutely. I think traveling through Africa, there's a lot of optimism. The institutions are getting stronger in democracy. It's easier to travel across Africa. I'm very optimistic.
Great. Amanda, the last say, because you're our host.
You know, I think for us important is the working together. You know, for us to really, and I really believe that that Africa is there to make it, is there to make its mark, and I think we do make our mark. You know, I think for me the big thing is that if we can showcase, because when you decide on a meeting, you first think continent, and then you think, you know, a country, and then it is a city. And so if we as a continent can demonstrate that we can do it, we can deliver, we are pioneering, we're innovative, I am proud to say I am an African.
Great. I think on that note, we will end our discussion. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen in the audience, let's hear it from my panel, Amanda Kotse-Nhlapo. We also have Daniel Kinnear, Gary Grimmer, and Mr. Manaj Papa. Well, with that, we come to the end of this year's edition of South Africa Open for Business from Meetings Africa 2013. My name is Lionel Skink. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.